evening, everybody. Well, it's evening here. I don't know what time it is there when you're watching this, but welcome back to Grumpy Acres. I got Tag with me. Say hi to Tag, everybody. We are here
Ah,
for, was it episode 12? Yeah, episode 12 of our Principles of Freedom video or series. This one's actually pretty cool, and I think this one's going to be really up both our alleys because we both have preached this constantly. So, without further ado, Principle 23 says a free society cannot survive as a republic without a broad program of general education. What's your initial thoughts on that one, Tag?
yeah, there's a lot in this one. I mean, I don't know if you want to, cover. I mean, goodness, the grievances or the 10th Amendment, or I mean,
Well,
there's so much in this.
we went over the grievances already once. We did. I think we did a pretty comprehensive job. And if you guys
Did
haven't
we
seen that video, it's episode 8 or 9, I think. Go
did we go
back
over the
and
grievances?
do what?
We went over the grievances.
Yeah, that
Oh
was
my goodness.
yeah, we went over them one at a time.
Oh my goodness. All 27 of them. Man,
Yeah.
I was all fired up to talk about taxation without representation.
Well, if you want to talk about it, I
No, it's
think
okay, man.
no. But seriously, I think the important part as far as the grievances go, let me see if I can find it. I had it pulled up. Did you the one commentary that I read on Principle 23 said that King George's response to the Declaration of Independence showed exactly why a citizenry needed to be educated. And so I was like, I'd never read his response to the Declaration of Independence. So I went out and found it, and he went up and he gave a speech to the British Parliament, and the very last paragraph, I think really illustrates what they're talking about people needing to be educated and involved. So here's the very last paragraph of what he said. In this arduous contest, I can have no other object but to promote the true interest of all my subjects. No people ever enjoyed more happiness or lived under a milder government than those now revolted provinces. The improvements in every art of which they boast declare it, their numbers, their wealth, their strength by sea and land, which they think sufficient to enable them to make head against the whole power of the mother country, are infrangibly proofs of it. But basically, what that's saying is is the mere fact that they feel that they can go against me proves how happy they are and how wealthy they are. And then he finishes with this sentence: my desire is to restore them to the blessings of law and liberty, equally enjoyed by every subject, which they have fatally and desperately exchanged for the casualties of war and the arbitrary tyranny of chiefs. Wow. I don't know about you, but that's pretty narcissistic. Is that the word I'm looking for, Tag?
Yeah, I would say it's probably narcissistic. What came to my mind when you were reading that is, Biden sitting up there on the pedestal talking about how we have such a great economy and we should be, thrilled with it. And, it just kind of made me get, kind of flashback to, you're like a CNN reporter now, G.
I know. Well, and it occurred to me, the whole thing about the general education, as 21st century, or I guess we're 22nd century now, as 22nd century Americans, when you say general education, what's the first thing that pops into people's minds?
High school.
High school, government schools,
Yeah.
kindergarten, you know, Head Start programs, college loans. That's what they think about. And and I think by them pointing out his reaction, that they're talking about something broader than formalized education, the ability to become informed and come to their own conclusions. I think that at the root of Principle 23 is probably the most critical thing. And speaking of critical thinking, which leads us to our own self conclusions. Um, that man, that is something that I hadn't really thought about. I mean, I've constantly, oh, they don't teach kids critical thinking anymore.
Mhm.
But just as a general rule of thumb for the population, I think that goes across the board. There's a lot of people out there that do not critically think and do not become educated about just everything in general.
Well, and think about how complicated that psyop has to be, because back in the colonial days, they didn't have a lot of the things we had today. We're clearly way more intelligent today than civilization would have been, years and years and years ago. And in order for them to keep us stupid, they got to keep us divided, right? They got to feed us full of propaganda from both the right and the left. And, I guess that's why they call it TV programming. This starts in the schools, right? It goes into the universities and now even into the financial systems and the banks, which, traditionally were conservative, but, they've kind of taken all of that over too. So it amazes me it's a sophisticated psyop game that goes on to keep us all the way that we are.
Oh yeah. It's so Machiavellian, it's not even funny.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned the 10th Amendment earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Now why does the 10th Amendment pertain to general education? How is that?
Well, hold on, let me well, the 10th Amendment is what outlines. Hold on one second here. I didn't have it pulled up, but I'll pull it up here real quick. The 10th Amendment, sometimes written, let me see, restricts the power of the federal government. And it basically says, that these, and there's like 7 or 8, these are the duties of the federal government. All of the other powers, lie in the hand of the state, which clearly doesn't happen today. But I think it absolutely plays into this.
Yeah, the states that there's really nothing in the Constitution that I could find that says anything about the federal government even being involved in education.
No, it has nothing to do with it. And I can actually, if you give me just a second, let me find it here, right here. I think it's grievance 2. So it says that here's basically the powers given, through the Article 1, Section 8, Articles 2 and 5, Amendments 8, 16, 19, 20, 23, and 26.
Mm-hmm.
Defense, war prosecution, peace, foreign relations, foreign commerce, and interstate commerce. The protection of citizens to constitutional rights and ensuring that slavery remains illegal. Establishing federal courts inferior to the Supreme Courts. Copyright protection, coining money. Establishing post office and post roads, establishing a national set of universal weights and measures, and taxation when needed to raise revenue to perform these essential functions. So there's 7 of them, plus the right to tax to raise revenue for those 7. Everything else lies in the hands of the state. Right. And nowhere did you hear me mention education.
Right. And the sad thing is that their usurpation of a local education, I had forgotten. I knew this as a fact, but I had forgotten about it. The Department of Education didn't exist before October 1979.
Mm-hmm.
And it was Jimmy Carter's parting gift and the progressives' parting gift whenever Reagan was coming into office. And if we're going to point to one specific place in American history where education started to deteriorate, and when I say education, I am specifically talking about the school systems right now, but that, as I said before, that leads into all these other things too. I think you could point out that the creation of the Department of Education is probably a key point, and it's a public law. It's a law. It could very easily be done away with, but nobody's had the fortitude to do it yet.
Yeah, it's just we just don't stand up to it because it is no law.
Right.
It's contrary to what the Constitution specifically says. But again, with this whole series you and I have been doing is, pixie dust and rainbow farts. So, all the way through. But, it's Principle 23 says the reaction of King George to the list of grievances in the Declaration of Independence is an example of why the tyrants wanted to keep the people ignorant to the actions. In order to preserve and encourage the sacred right of the people to gain knowledge, the Constitution forbids the federal government from involving itself in the education of the people. It leaves this responsibility to the state and the people where it can be locally controlled, the 10th Amendment.
Right. Well, and here's You hit on a key point about being generally educated. You know, there are people out there that will say the Constitution doesn't say they can't do it. It doesn't specifically say they can't do it. So that's how this law comes about. And what's that? The positive rights versus negative rights, looking at the Constitution, you know? So my gosh, how different would this country be if every school and every parent taught their children just basic civics?
Oh, shit! Just taught them what their rights were.
Yeah, you know,
Taught them why was it that our founding fathers and the colonials were so mad? You know, what were the reasons? And I mean, I bet you 99% of people couldn't answer that question.
right.
Maybe more.
Well, up until we started doing this, I couldn't give you a coherent answer. I'd get it in the same ballpark, but I probably could not get a coherent answer out of you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I asked you if we were going over the grievances in the 10th Amendment, because that's really what this is about, in my opinion. Is about, you know, as it mentions right there, you know, the reaction to the reaction of King George to their list of grievances. Right, which was the Declaration of Independence, which you read.
Right. Right. Well, why don't you go ahead and rehash them for people, and so our new listeners, we've got a lot of new people here too, and there's a lot of people on Rumble too. Did you? Yeah, I've been posting these on Rumble, and we're starting to get viewers over on Rumble. So
Yeah, you know, I've got a Rumble account, but I've just not spent any time over there. None.
you know, but why don't you
None.
go ahead? Why don't you go ahead and recap it for everybody, just so we're all up to speed.
Oh my goodness. Well, there's 27 of them.
Right. Right.
So do you have them in front of you? So you
No,
try.
I can pull them up.
Why don't we pull up and you start, and we'll just alternate.
Okay, hang on a second, folks. Uh, let's see here. GR. Sorry, I'm henpecking, guys.
We would expect nothing else from a Marine.
The grievances. Hey, you're lucky I can spell, man. Okay. We got grievance one. He has refused his assent to laws the most wholesome and necessary for the public good.
Yep. So basically, he has refused his blessing to laws that the colonies created, laws that were important and, you know, were necessary to the public good.
Right.
Right.
Basically, he did away with self-governance,
Yeah.
which most of the colonies of the British Empire had some semblance of.
Yeah. Well, there was a thing they passed that the British passed called the Stamp Act.
Mhm.
Back then, and there was a bunch of protests to it, and then, you know, Britain decides that or England decides that it wouldn't press charges, you know, against the people to protest as long as they agreed to repair any, you know, damage to any public property. But then when the colonies asked for an actual pardon for all of them protesting, King George, you know, refused.
Mhm.
But basically, they were looking for what was called a free pardon. But you may read number two.
Yep. He has forbidden his government to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance unless suspended in their operation until his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend them, which is basically a follow-on of grievance one, saying that they could not institute any laws unless he gave it the go ahead. And then he just set it aside and let it slide. So they were basically paralyzed.
Yeah, you know what's interesting to me is the constitutional response to that, to grievance number two. I read them already, but it says the constitutional articles and subsequent amendments specify the responsibilities and powers of our government.
Mhm.
They are listed in Article 1, Section 8, Articles 2 and 5, and Amendments 8, 16, 19, 20, 23, and 26. These powers are derived from one of the following categories, and I read them to you, you know, defense,
Yep.
you know, the protection of constitutional rights. You know, what's so interesting to me, though, about this is number 8 says taxation when needed to raise revenue to perform these essential functions, the 7 items listed above, right?
Mhm.
And so it's interesting to me that our taxes are supposed to be based upon, or the federal taxes are supposed to be based upon the 7 items listed above. And I don't know, G, do you know how many taxes we pay today? How many
Oh my
separate taxes on
gosh.
the tax code?
Oh my gosh, isn't it 180,000 pages of tax law?
Yeah, but the actual tax, the number of separate taxes is 97.
Oh, really? I did
Yeah,
not know that. I
yeah,
probably heard that in the past.
yeah. So
Well,
it's
and they use the word neglect there, and neglect is one of the reasons that John Locke uh, gave us a valid reason. I remember that from the last time we talked about it.
mhm.
But neglect is one of the reasons that people can dissolve a government when the government neglects them.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. You know how much? You know what the tax rate was, and you got me on taxes. What tax rate was back in 1775?
It was single digit, wasn't it?
1.5%.
1.5. Oh my gosh. My gosh. Those
One and a
people
half
live.
percent. The average American today pays almost 60%. It's like 59.7% of their taxes if you calculate, the 97 taxes on the tax code. Um, so we're paying just about 60% of our income in taxes. And the Revolutionary War, one of their main grievances was taxation without representation, right?
Yep.
And now that's one further on down the list. But anyway, I don't
Well, and
mean to.
the reason why it's allowed to go on is because people don't understand it.
Well, of
I could
course,
I
they
could fix
make
that
up the.
problem. I could fix that problem right now. Do away with one of two ways. Do away with withholding so that everybody had to write a big fat check at the end of the year, or make people pay taxes by hand once a month. And after about 2 or 3 months of that check going out, or one tax season of having to write that great big monstrous check to the government, oh boy, that people would want those tax laws changed.
Man,
Guys,
I tell people all the time, log your taxes, log them for a solid year. Don't listen to me, just log them,
yeah.
and you'll be amazed. What comes out. The answer, but is to go to a flat tax, in my opinion. To go to you just pay this percentage of your income. The problem is the government couldn't survive like that. They spend so much money, and they
Oh
are so far in debt. Our 59.7% tax rate on average is getting ready to go up a whole bunch.
no, the government does not want to survive on that.
Correct.
It's not they can't.
No, they
It's not
can't.
they can't.
But they can't, because what would happen is as soon as you did it, they default. It's the end of the
Well,
government right there.
then that's what statesmen are for.
Yeah, I'm just saying that's why the powers that be, could not survive.
Right. You ready for number 3?
Sure.
Grievance 3 says he has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only.
Yeah, does that ring a bell?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, how many laws do we have to deal with that come out of, some other place where we don't have any representation? I can
Right.
think of a lot of them,
Right.
you know.
But the one this thing that I pulled up has a lot of John Locke in it.
Yeah.
Oh,
Actually, I got a quote. Let me see here, right here. John Locke said, when such a single person or prince sets up his own arbitrary will in place of laws, which are the will of society declared by the legislative, then the legislative is changed. Locke lists changing the legislation without the people's knowledge or consent is another situation that justifies the dissolution of the government.
yep.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's so many things, that go on here where, I mean, this refers to every executive order ever sent out. Right? I mean, how many laws get passed? How many things go on where we have
Even the
just
good ones.
yeah, it's not even a law, but
Yeah.
we went over that last week.
Yep. Okay. Grievance 4. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual and also uncomfortable and distance from the depository of public records for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures.
I love this one. I love this one.
Actually, that's as far as tyranny goes, that's pretty darn creative.
Oh, they do it every day to us.
Yeah.
How many things do we do? Even we were just talking about taxes, the tax codes that make it so hard to understand it. right? That you just again fatigue us into compliance with those measures, and man, it happens in I mean so many aspects of our life that we just take the easy way because it's the easy
Well,
way.
well, and even I'll even go to the calling together legislative bodies in unusual places. That goes back to our conversation about the regional library.
Mm-hmm.
They held the public hearings that you had to attend. They held them at the same place about 50 miles apart on the same day.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no way that you could attend both of them.
Yeah,
So don't think, if people are out there thinking that's kind of a reach, no, it happens.
yeah,
It happens right now.
yeah, happening every day.
Let's see here. Grievance 5. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions of the rights of the people. And what was it? It's in here. North Carolina, Massachusetts, North Carolina, and Virginia were the three House legislative bodies that he disbanded because they made
Mm-hmm.
him unhappy. Yeah.
Yep. And it's back to that same thing, which we fight now today, which is, the laws don't apply to the big dogs.
Yep.
They only apply to the little dogs.
And I think the wording of that's kind of interesting. For opposing with manly firmness. And they hadn't taken up arms by then. So they're not talking about picking up arms and going against the crown. They were talking about somebody being principled and moral in their
Mm-hmm.
objections.
Yeah. Someone taking a stand, someone getting on YouTube saying they don't like the shit that's going on.
Yep. Yep. Or maybe elected officials that have a little bit of backbone.
Mm.
Maybe someday. Maybe
Yeah.
someday.
I'm voting for a lot of Mickey Mouse this year.
Oh yeah.
I am.
Grievance 6. He has refused for a long time after such disillusions to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercises. The state remaining, in the meantime, exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. Basically saying that he did not allow the states to elect legislative bodies, and therefore the people and the governments of those states were subjected to internal problems as well as problems coming from the outside. Yeah. But yeah, that's is there off the top of my head, would there be a modern equivalent of that? Well, yeah, special elections. States holding off on special elections and uh, doing stuff to allow for untimely counting of votes. You know,
I can't believe that's the only example you gave.
well, I'm trying to think specifically of
Of the most successful, most popular president in the history of the United States.
Joe Biden. That hurt. 81 million people can't be wrong. Tag.
I know, right? I know. We're the weird ones.
Yep. Yep. Where are we? We're on grievance 7, right?
7.
Grievance 7. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of land. Oh my goodness. That sounds like an open border, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the one thing that it illustrates for sure is that immigration was never designed to be a federal deal,
Right.
right? It was supposed to lie in the hands of the states, and the states were supposed to be able to deal with it, kind of as they were. Back then it was the German immigrants, right? There was a bunch of German immigrants coming in, and they were trying to, King George was trying to stop them from coming in. But I think what's so interesting about this is that it says to prevent the population of these states, right? It doesn't say the population of the United States. It says of these states.
Right.
Again, inferring that it belongs in the hands of the state.
Yep. Grievance 8. Now, before I go on, I want to say if anybody's dropped into the video right now and they missed the very first part of this, we're going over the grievances in the Declaration of Independence, and you may be asking yourself, what's that got to do with general education? Tag, correct me if I'm wrong. If people do not understand where we came from as far as the original grievances, then there's no way that we can address what's happening now. If we don't understand what our rights are and where we came from, then we have no foundation to move forward on.
Well, I think there's another side too, which is that, gee, King George back on that day wanted the colonists to be stupid,
Mhm.
right? So the reaction to King George to the list of grievances in the Declaration of Independence is an example of why tyrants want to keep the people ignorant to their actions.
Right.
Right? I mean, that's listed under Principle 23.
Mhm. Well, and the reason I say that is because if you read that, everybody's going to start thinking about mass media and things like that. I mean, that's the first thing that popped into my head when I read it.
Yeah.
And as I was studying this week, I understood that wasn't the gist of what they're talking about. Um, where are we? Grievance 8. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. So basically, he told the colonies that they could not form courts.
Right. Right.
And
So only the representative of King George could decide whether a law was broken or what law was valid.
right. And that creates a whole host of problems.
Oh yeah.
Whole host of problems. And then grievance 9 was right along with that. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries.
Yeah. So what you're saying is when the king at the top gets to determine how long your job and how much you make, you're loyal to him?
Yep. Yeah. And I think that's the lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court is a direct response to that specific grievance. Okay. Grievance 10.
You ought to like this one.
He has oh man, I got a pop up. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. Number one, I like that he has sent hither swarms, like insects. I like that.
That's a t-shirt. That's a great t-shirt.
Oh man, uh, yeah, that one. Gosh, I don't even know where to start on that one.
How about the IRS? He's talking about he's erected a multitude of new offices. How about
That's
the Department of Homeland Security? How about Space Force? How about the FBI, the CIA? How about, I mean, you pick any of them.
yeah.
And then he sent hither swarms of those officers to harass people and eat us out of our substance, like taxation is theft at 60% of your income.
Yeah.
Suppose that hurts your substance?
Yep. I didn't want to say the IRS because that seemed like a low hanging fruit.
Okay. Well, it was low hanging.
It's extremely low hanging. I mean, 86,000 people. I mean, they're more than double the size of the IRS for some reason. I mean, it's not to make it more efficient. If you've ever worked for the government, you know that's true.
Yep. Yep.
Grievance 11. Do what?
Okay, yeah, and they're getting ready to send hither swarms of new IRS agents.
Yes. Grievance 11. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. Gee whiz, the War Powers Act comes to mind specifically. You know, when's the last time that we actually declared war? World War II was the last time we actually declared war, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You know, we've been going to war on executive fiat ever since World War II. You know,
Well, and I would argue another side to that too, which is how many local police departments own an MRAP.
yeah.
So I mean, you might have a different title, a different badge on their sleeve, but I would say those standing armies around us are in every halfway decent sized town in America.
You could make that argument. That'd be a very strong argument too.
Mhm.
Grievance 12. He has affected to render the military independent of the and he has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civilian power.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Who do they serve?
They serve the government.
Mhm.
They serve the government. I mean that General Milley thing that came out recently where he undermined in an email, he admitted that he undermined President Trump,
Mhm.
which we went back, we were talking about treason a couple of times ago. It seems pretty cut and dried on that bit, that they're never going to prosecute him because the DOD holds too much power. You know, that was that one's a sore point. I'm sorry.
They're all sore points.
Well, no, what was it? Who was it? Twitter last year or the year before? It was pretty recently.
Mhm.
Got rid of a bunch of bot accounts that were quote unquote spreading misinformation, and they did some research on them, and a majority of them ended up belonging to the DOD out of the Pentagon.
Mhm.
You know, so does that doesn't seem like something that's accountable to civilian leadership. You know, doesn't either that or the civilian leadership's doing it. You know, either way, it's
Well,
not good.
you and I talked about this, at the last one, that the answer to all of this is accountability.
Yep.
Right. At the end of the day, freedom is choice, but liberty is accountability. Right. But again, this is why we're talking about cotton candy, rainbows, and unicorn farts, because none of this is what we live in today.
No.
None of it.
Grievance 13. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts and pretended legislation. UN.
Oh, there's a whole bunch. He has combined with others to subject us to basically laws that are foreign to the Constitution.
Mhm.
How many laws do we deal with every day that are foreign to the Constitution?
Oh yeah,
Most of them.
yeah. And I'm thinking externally, and you're talking about internally.
Yeah.
You know.
Isn't that funny how perception, how you can read something, but to me what that says is that one of their, grievances was, hey, listen, you're making laws outside the Constitution.
Right.
Which goes on every single day.
Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. You know what? We're serving up a great big black pill. We're going to have to come up with a good white pill at the end of this. Grievance 14 for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us.
Mm-hmm.
This was based on the Mutiny Act, which is commonly known as the Quartering Act. It allowed soldiers to be stationed in the colonies to request shelter from any citizen and created punishment for refusal.
Yep. This is where the Fifth Amendment come from to the Bill of Rights.
Right. And that it's not specifically happening that way, but they use eminent domain all the time to seize properties for military bases.
Yeah, you want me to tell you a funny story?
What's that?
So you know some of my business dealings that I deal with, right? And some of them are pretty what's a word I would even use? I want to be careful how I say this, but anyway, so I was talking to someone a pretty successful person, and they were talking about they needed to come up with a water supply for a new I'll call it industrial park, right? And so they had located a couple places where they could put this watershed in for this industrial park. And so I asked him, I said, so he was talking about one piece of land in particular because it was only going to affect 2 landowners, and they were excited about that. And I said, so what do? Do you just go, buy them out? And he said, well, yeah, we go try, to offer them a fair price for it. And I said, well, what happens if they don't sell? He goes, we'll take it from them. Quote.
Yep.
So what a
Happens
shame.
all the time.
Yep.
Happens all the time.
Yep.
Grievance 15 for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these three states. They're talking about the representatives of the crown, and
Yes.
in specific response to the Boston Massacre.
Well, and I would word it a different way too. What they're talking about is cronies, right? Representatives of the power that be that are shielded from the law
Right.
in modern times.
Yes, I think it's a good translation into modern times.
Mm-hmm.
Like being able to uh, do things that would get us put in prison. You know,
Like delete, 30,000
anything
emails.
else, smoke crack on tape, and throw a gun in a trash can.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Uh, not pointing any fingers at anybody. Just saying.
No, of course not.
Grievance 16 for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world. Um, yeah, you know what? I'm gonna say that this is just me, my personal opinion. They probably have not done that to us. They probably, if you were to look at that, they've done the exact opposite to us. They've made
Mm-hmm.
us dependent on other places instead of having it here in the United States.
Yeah, they got smart. They figured out that they could, skim the cream off the top
Yeah,
of every transaction.
yeah. Here's one you're gonna like. Uh, Here's 18 for depriving us in many cases of the benefit of a jury trial.
Yep. Did you purposely skip 17?
Did I?
I don't know.
Oh,
I thought that's the
oh,
one.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I did. I did.
No, I know what it was. You didn't want me ranting about taxes.
Oh no, I seriously, I completely missed it. I scrolled too far. I'm sorry, man. So grievance, anything on 18 since I already mentioned it?
Okay, depriving us in many cases of the benefit of a jury trial. Like the Patriot Act.
Patriot Act. I'll
Right.
even I'll even go further than that and say all these adjudication boards that these different government agencies have that you have to go in front of in lieu of actually going to a trial, where you're going up against a panel instead of a jury of your peers. I'd say that's a modern day example of that. Okay, grievance 17 for imposing taxes on us without our consent. Go. I thought I saw smoke coming from yours, and I was just trying to give you an outlet, man.
Dude, it is just crazy to me that the revolution was fought over a 1.7% tax.
Yeah.
We're at 60% and we sucking our thumbs.
Oh yeah.
Man.
Oh, we are daily Americans are subjected to way more tyranny than what our forefathers faced. And
Yeah, I mean,
as a whole, we don't do anything about it.
yeah, I don't know if you know this or not, but there's 18 million employees of state and federal governments in our country today, and then there's another almost 3 million people who are locked up in jail, right? So that's about 22 million people of the 330 million people in America, which of those about 40% of them are of working age, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you've got about 80, what's that, 120 million of 120 million people out there, 1/5 of them, the other people have to pay for, right?
Yep.
On top of all of the old, all of the young, all of the, et cetera, et cetera. And so, man, there are so few people carrying 100% of the bill.
Well, and you were talking about that this weekend up at Hack's place, and you were telling the example of the wagon and what happens.
Yeah, so this is actually, I think, one of the simplest examples of why we're doomed to fail and why it will not continue. There's a, and I don't know where it came from, but just an old tale of a society, and you think about it as a wagon, and you've got, let's say, 75 people who are pulling the wagon, and 25 people and these 25 people are the deserving needy, right? They're the people who can't walk, they're the elderly, they're the people who deserve to be carried in the wagon. Well, as time wears on, more and more people drop out of the 75 and jump in the wagon because they just don't want to walk anymore, and they don't want to pull the wagon anymore. And then there comes a day where the people who are left pulling the wagon just drop the wagon and say, I'm not doing it anymore. I'm done. Mm-hmm. And I think this is what you're seeing, with the and what do they call that? The great migration, where people are just leaving work. They're just checking out. Mm-hmm. I think you're seeing more and more of this, of people dropping the wagon today and saying, I don't want to play the game anymore. I'm sick and tired of playing the game. because now 25 people are carrying the 75, and that's what we're experiencing today. And I think that's the example you were asking for, correct? You?
Yep. Yep. I think it's very accurate too. I think it's a very eloquent and simple one. Everybody that's watching this should be able to take that and share that with somebody that's confused about why we feel the way we feel. You
Yep.
know.
I can tell you,
Let's see.
I'm sick of it.
Grievance 19 for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses. He was shipping people that were accused of crimes in the colonies to Britain to be tried in Britain.
Yeah.
So not a jury of your peers.
Right.
Right. You know, what's the modern equivalent of that? Gosh, I know there's one. There's got to be a modern equivalent. Well,
yeah, I mean, I think if you can, look at this a different way too, and you kind of gonna have to interpret it into modern times, right?
well, that's
So
what
I would say for transporting us beyond, our civil culture, and being tried by, military tribunals or the Patriot Act, or by, being not being tried by, a group of our peers.
Well, and quite literally, there are people in the government now that feel that Americans should be sent to The Hague to stand in front of the International Tribunal at The Hague for different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not. I mean, it's a quite. It hasn't become quite literal yet, but there are people out there that are advocating for it. You know, grievance number 20 for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government and enlarging its boundaries to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies. Talking about the French Indian War, right? How they ended up taking Canada from the French, and basically did to Canada what they wanted to do to the United States.
Well, the British had made a treaty with the American Indians back then, so most of the American Indian tribes sided with the British, at least early on. But I don't know if you know this or not, but the Iroquois Indians, part of their teaching is in our Constitution today.
Oh yeah,
they took a lot of the stuff out of the Iroquois. I don't remember what the name of it was. I'll have to look it up
Iroquois
here.
Confederation. What they called it.
Somewhere up here. No, I got the Iroquois Constitution, or the Great Law of Peace. But anyway, I don't want to derail. But that was super, super fascinating to me, at least.
Oh yeah, yeah.
All right, where are we at?
Okay, we are at grievance 21 for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our government. He rewrote several state charters before.
Massachusetts, Virginia, North Carolina. Was it North Carolina?
Yeah, North Carolina was the other one, I think. Yeah, imagine the federal government coming down now and saying, okay, Kansas, Missouri, Tennessee, wherever you live. Imagine them coming down and telling them, yeah, your Constitution's wrong and you have to rewrite it. Oh, they do that through the Supreme Court out now, don't they?
I'm going to say, imagine them coming in to a state and saying, hey, you're going to vote for, these two parties, and we're going to dump all of your money into that. So we're going to make you pay for it. So there is no other choices, so that you have to take our form.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Grievance 22 for suspending our legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever.
Basically, you mean like an executive order?
Like an executive order, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's the thing about it, folks. The modern day examples of these, they're no, they have not abolished any state legislatures, but the equivalent of abolishing them is making it so that they can't retaliate,
or they just go around them.
Yeah, they go around them in a way that so these aren't we read these grievances and you may be sitting there going, well, that's not going on now. Yes, it is in some form. It is going on. Where are we? We're at 23.
Yep.
He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. That was the whole troops being stationed there and aggressively going after dissent in the colonies.
Mm-hmm.
And waging war. People hear that and they think standing armies and doing all that stuff. The federal government can wage war against us in a multitude of ways that has nothing to do with armies. They do it economically, they do it bureaucratically,
Mm-hmm.
they do it legally. In fact, just in my adult life, they've come up with a term for it, legal warfare,
Mm-hmm.
where they attack you legally.
No, and when we're being attacked,
Yeah.
we're being attacked from every single corner. In the worst case of modern slavery ever,
Yep.
they get us in every single corner.
Grievance 24. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coast, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. That was in direct. Correct me if I'm wrong. Hang on. Okay. Lord Dunmore ordered the seizure of several American merchant vessels, and several naval assaults were made upon the colonies, disrupting the affected towns. Now, this goes back to Grievance 23. They were literally waging war with armies before the start of the Revolutionary War in general. Now,
Could you say this one too, that he has plundered our families, ravaged our communities, burnt our cultures, and destroyed the lives of our people?
yeah. Well, and I'll give you more. I'll give you more direct example of that. And it's, when I say this, don't think that I agree with the guy that it happened to, but Waco.
Mm-hmm.
Waco. I don't care what you think about David Koresh and the Branch Davidians. What the U.S. government waged war against them,
Mm-hmm.
quite literally.
Yeah, that was.
Where are we? We're on 25.
Yep.
Grievance 25. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages and unworthy of the head of a civilized nation. Now, do we have foreign troops on our soil, Tag?
Some people say we do. I mean, well, let me back up. With 100% certainty, we do. The question is to what degree, right? I mean, when I was in the service, I mean, every day when you walk down, the street, you've seen some soldier from another country. I mean,
Right.
but
Well, and I think you can't conflate those two, because those are our allies working with us. I worked in several commands where there were foreign troops in the commands, and they weren't there to do us harm.
Mhm.
But they just opened up Chinese police stations. They just opened up Chinese police stations in New York and San Francisco, and some other. There may be other places too. So we've got official agents of foreign countries on our soil now. They're supposed to be just going after Chinese citizens that are here, but still aren't. At last I checked, those people that are here on our country as guests, doesn't the Constitution apply to them too?
No.
No, it doesn't.
Mm-mm.
It doesn't. No. Well, they are a guest.
No, it could.
Yeah, I got spanked by saying that one time. You get my point, though.
Mm-hmm.
You get my point. How long until there's an American that is associated with those Chinese, and the Chinese do something to an American.
Well, I mean, a foreign government should not be allowed to come into our country and extradite their own citizens. That should be something that goes through a process, right?
Absolutely. Grievance number 26. He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. That was what was it? They would Shanghai American sailors and force them to serve on British ships.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, it made me think about this. Like when you read these, I'm trying to think to myself, how does it apply in modern days, right? And we have more divide in our country than we've ever had.
mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe not ever, but I mean, I don't know what the divide was like during the Civil War, right? I mean, I wasn't alive back then, but certainly in my lifetime, we have more divide than we've ever had. And I would argue that the divide is created by the king.
Well, and I'll tell you, grievance 26, they talk about the high seas, and I mentioned the sailors, modern day equivalent, business owners.
Mm-hmm.
If business owners don't do what the government wants them to do, they suffer penalties.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're doing things on behalf of the government that they would not do otherwise if it weren't for the fact that their livelihoods are in
mm-hmm.
threat. Same with hospitals and doctors.
Mm-hmm.
And trust me, folks, my opinion of doctors and hospitals and the healthcare system in general after the last 2 years is extremely low. So
mm-hmm.
don't think I'm feeling sorry for them, but there's a lot of people in that industry that were flat out told, do what we say, or your livelihood is gone. And
well, I know a lot of great people in that industry who's fought the entire way.
Yeah.
Bunch.
And grievance.
I think. Go ahead. I'll say it after this.
No, go ahead. What are you gonna say?
I was gonna say I think you should rewrite all of these and we should do a show on the Tao of Grumpy on how the 27 grievances apply to today and rewrite them.
Yeah, let me think about that.
That'd be fun.
Hey, you want to get on somebody's list? Yeah, let's do that. Get me on a list. Oh, hell yeah.
You're already on a list, dude.
Grievance 27. He has excited domestic insurrections among us. Oh my God. And has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions.
Yeah, what do you think of this one, man?
So the sitting vice president of the United States bailed rioters out of jail, people that destroyed private property and put lives on the line. Mm-hmm. Bailed them out of jail and hailed them as being so virtuous. And she's just the tip. She's just the tip of that spear. There's so many people in positions of power that encouraged what went on throughout 2018, 2019, and going on right now that you don't hear about. People aren't educated about what's going on now.
No, you sure hear about January 6th, though.
Yeah, you hear about January 6th.
But not Ferguson.
Nope. Or what's going on in Portland.
Mm-hmm.
Or what's going on in these other places.
Right.
So yeah, and if anybody out there, if there's anybody watching this that's poo-pooing what I'm saying here, you're completely wrong. The Antifa and BLM could not exist if the government did not want them to exist. There are certain powerful segments of our population and government that need people like Antifa and BLM to cause the problems that they have. And
Gee, it keeps us divided. This is the thing I've been telling people forever. And it actually irritates me a little bit, even on like freesteading, for example. I was listening to people debate the Bible, and I was reading back and forth, and they were getting kind of testy with each other. And I couldn't help but think to myself, you know what? If we could just come together as a people and recognize that we all have differences and that it's okay, and that we can be tolerant, and we don't have to agree, and it's perfectly fine. But that's exactly what would make us strong. Antifa, Black Lives Matter, white supremacy, all of them, the powers that be have their hands in. They want us divided. Mm-hmm. They absolutely want us divided, because if we're divided, we're weak. Hey, I want to mention something else here that I think is interesting.
Okay.
I did not understand this at the time for years and years, because they used the word the merciless Indian savages. in there, and I didn't understand. I'm like, like this always made me feel like, wait a second, we landed on their land, you know, they were here first, and then we keep pushing more and more, to the west, and they're getting pissy about it. Shit, I don't blame them,
Yep.
right? Why this was written in there, and then back to the Iroquois Constitution, how a lot of that was put into the Constitution. I just find it interesting that on the surface, I think what he was really saying here was because of the treaty that was made between the British and the Indians. I think he was really more referring to them fighting against the colonials, not necessarily, that they were savages. But this is an
Well,
interesting.
I think the addition of the addition at the end of the undistinguished destruction is what made them savages in the founders' eyes.
Yeah.
Because you didn't, you didn't go after all ages, you didn't go after the different sexes and different conditions. Where Indian warfare, even by the quote unquote civilized tribes of the eastern coast, was pretty damn brutal. I mean, they understood total warfare completely, and they waged it.
Yeah.
So I think it's a matter of they felt that it was a savage and merciless way of doing warfare. My dad's a history teacher, and he one thing he drove into my head when I was in high school was we can't, and we do this, people do this all the time today, and it just drives me nuts. We cannot judge past American culture by our sensibilities. That doesn't excuse what went on. It does not excuse their behavior and their actions, but we can't judge them on that because, back in the mid 1800s, the expansion into the West during the Indian Wars, the general consensus was that Indians were savage, and that you heard the phrase, the only good Indian's a dead Indian. Does the fact that they believe that make them bad people? No, it just means that they're misguided, and they had some really screwy ideas, right? But we can't condemn them as a whole on that one thing. They were wrong. Yes, they were completely wrong. And it should not have happened. It was so unchristian, it wasn't even funny, but it did happen, and that's the way people felt back then. But we have to understand that to get through where we are now. I don't know, just kind of off.
I think it was a huge injustice, and but I think to your point is I wasn't alive. Nobody alive today was alive during that time,
Right.
And but it big injustice.
Right. Okay. So one of the commentaries that I was reading about this principle specifically, they started talking about first order effects and second order effects, and how the lack of education by the populace, not necessarily the schooling and all that, but just the education, can cause problems that people just never think about. And they called it the tale of two rat farms, and it's dealing with the French in Indochina. So in the late 1800s, the French went into Hanoi and they built sewer systems, bringing modern hygiene and all that to the poor, underdeveloped people of northern Vietnam. Right? They built these sewer systems, and it turns out that sewer systems that collect all the human waste and excess food and all that stuff, great breeding ground for rats. Bless you. Who would have thought about that? All right. So the consequences, the first order of effects are actions have consequences. So the action of bringing modernity to Hanoi caused this explosion in the rat population. 1902, they had a breakout of the bubonic plague. All right. And so they came down with some laws where they started paying a bounty for rat tails. Well, originally it was for rats, but they got so many rats that they couldn't dispose of them. So they just said the rat tail, and the people were supposed to dispose of the rats. Second order of effect there is consequences have consequences. So as a result of them passing all these laws and paying this bounty, and apparently the bounty was really good for for that area. It made some people rich. Several things started happening. Number one, they had entrepreneurs that started raising rats, because you can't tell a domestic rat from a wild rat. And so they were raising domestic rats, and they were getting a bounty off of it. Consequence number two, there were people that figured out that you could cut a rat's tail off and let it go free, and it can survive without its tail. So they would catch these rats live, cut their tails off so that they could go breed more rats. So you literally had two groups of people doing this, making the problem worse. Okay. So how does that pertain to the lack of education and all this? So the consequences of the actions of the federal government, as far as the education of the people and the actions of the media that fact checks and has a narrative, is the problem is people are uninformed. All right. So then, as a consequence of that, they feel that they need to throw more money at it. They as in the government. All right. This huge influx of money creates new niches for people to take advantage of the system. So in an attempt to educate people, when I say educate this time, I'm talking about money thrown into the school systems. They passed a law to give journalists debt relief or income relief or something like that.
Journalists.
Yeah, it creates this. It's created this whole niche of people that have zero desire to fix the problem, because they're benefiting from these second effect consequences. And it's not just higher education. The school systems, because they're throwing more money at it, more bureaucracy, more bureaucrats, student loan debt, all this stuff. It's not just that. It's healthcare. They subsidize these hospitals, and it gives them more control over the hospitals. Homelessness is caused by the government. I don't care what anybody says. There's that very small fraction of people that are homeless because they want to be, but everybody else that's involuntary homeless is because of some government program that happened. Intelligence gathering. The Patriot Act. We keep going to it. The second order of effects on that. Look what it's done to our personal freedoms. And I'll admit when it first came out, for like the first year it was out, I was like, hey, this is a good thing, because at that time I still trusted the government. I've since learned the error of my ways. But it's important that the whole point of the story there is we have to understand the consequences of the actions, the first order of effects. Then we need to understand the consequences of the consequences, because that's where things go completely off the rail. And becoming educated. How do we do that? There's the white pill in this whole thing talking about the grievances and stuff. Is how do we educate ourselves, and how do we educate each other? Tag, I know you got some thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, I think it goes back to what we said before in the last episode that we did. And I think it's something that I preach all the time, is you've got to be accountable to your own freedom and accountable for your own freedom. Part of that is being educated and understanding what the issues are, or understanding how the system works, and how it works against you. Right. I mean, if we can get everybody's mind wrapped around the process of living free, right, and all of the intricacies that go into it, I think you get educated along the way. I mean, just like reaching out and doing this series with you, I was, super familiar with the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and, the Declaration of Independence, and read them many, 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 many times. I'd never gone down this road, before, but I've learned all kinds of things going down this with you, G.
Right. Same here, man. Same here. And I think it goes further than, at the root of it. Yes, everybody has to be accountable for their actions, but building community. I personally, as we built the circle that we've got here in northeastern Kansas, I've learned so much from everybody.
Mhm.
I learn stuff every time we get together. I learn stuff from everybody, and I become more educated in general.
Mhm.
You know, um, we talk about we talk about becoming involved in our communities in at large. You know, the school board, school board aside from the county sheriff, I'm going to say the school board is probably the second most important
Mhm.
thing.
Mhm.
You know, and becoming involved in that. And you know that one of the things we're trying to do with our community is get enough mass behind it, the people that are like-minded, that we can go in and we can influence those things locally.
Mhm.
And you
Yep.
mentioned it this weekend. There's people all over the country that are doing the same thing we're doing, and they're not doing it in response to us either. They're doing it completely separate from us, and it's
Mhm.
organic and it's growing on its own in other places, you
Mhm.
know, and
Beautiful.
while I'd like to say that you know we planted the seeds and communities are going to grow out of what we say, and they probably will, you know, like while I'd like to say that is the case across the board, it's not. And there's a lot of people coming to the same conclusion at the same time, you know, and they're understanding what direction we need to go in, which I think is awesome, you know. So there it is. There's your white pill. You know, we went through these grievances and and I agree with Tag. You know, we have to know about these, and we have to understand how our freedom is being usurped and how it was usurped in order to at least have a launch point. Is that the right term for it? A launch point
Yeah, I think it's fine.
for what
I
we're
mean,
doing.
I think you got to get it wrapped around. I think you got to get it between your ears of what it is, and take responsibility for not just your freedoms but for your production, right? Which I think is such a huge piece that a lot of people miss. I have taken complete responsibility for my production, for my freedom, for my liberty, and I'm going to go fight for it. And not obviously, I'm not talking about violence. I'm talking about building community is a great
Manly
example of
firmness,
fighting. What's that?
manly firmness.
Manly firmness. That's a fine word.
Yep.
Yep. And
Sounds kind
just
of dirty.
kind of. But yeah, I think it's just about taking accountability for everything and understanding that everything that happens is your fault, good or
Yep.
bad. And if you can get your head wrapped around all that, I think you're off to a great start.
Absolutely. Okay, Tag, we're kind of running out of time here. We got about 6 minutes left that we can fill before Zoom closes the shop on us. But you got anything going on that people need to hear about?
Oh yeah, goodness. I plumbed and wired my bathroom in Pod 4 today, and that was quite the chore. I lost 5 chickens today to predators.
Oh my gosh, seriously?
5 today, yeah. And they came right in the middle of the day. I was working. B was in her processing kitchen putting up peppers. And it's kind of one of those things that I can stop it, but then I can't have free range chickens.
Right.
And it's just part of the process. But today was a big day for 5, so I spent a little bit of time hunting. I did not see a hair of a coyote, nothing today. I was out in the woods, trying to take care of it, but I didn't see them. But anyway, yeah, so I lost 5 chickens today. But
Now, Tag, here's my suggestion for that. Go ahead and lock them up for the
mm-hmm,
time being in the short term.
mm-hmm,
Um, that way it'll draw the predators out and you have a better chance
yeah,
of actually catching them
yeah,
in getting around, and the chickens will be safe ish. You got the problem we had where the chickens can go right up over the fence. Uh,
yeah. It's
you know, it's that time of year, unfortunately, when the food supply is getting dwindled. But lock them up short term and see if you can't take care of the problem that way.
yeah. I'm gonna spend a little time tomorrow hunting to see if I can take care of the problem. But it's all good. You know what? It's just part of the process. It's no different than growing a garden. Did you know that when I plant a garden every year, I anticipate losing 30%
Yep.
every year. I anticipate 30% of my fruit trees not producing a harvest every year. So why would chickens be any different?
Yep. Agreed, man. Agreed. In fact, I think 30% is probably a little low. You should probably plan for more
Might
down,
be.
you know,
Yeah, might be.
because that definitely we definitely lost 50% of our stuff this year easily. You know.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool, man. I mean, well, not cool that you lost the chickens, but that you got a plan for taking care of it. We're just
Yeah.
doing we're just doing life, you know. Yoda's pushing trying to develop our brand, and we've got some people that got some rooting hormone. they saw Jess's video about it, or they heard us talking about Jess and Joe at American Roots, and then she did the video this week about the eucalyptus that she did clippings of. And uh-oh, I'm running out of power. What's going on? But hang on a second. Oh, there we go. Now I got power.
Got to plug it in, G.
Well, it was loose. It was loose. Yeah, so she's developing that. So we're trying to get that. We're trying to get that alternative revenue stream coming in, and it's really cool because she was talking tonight. She wants to get some stuff for canning and all that, and she's equated it. She has to do well with the sales and the marketing in order to get the money to buy the stuff for canning, which helps the business and all this other stuff. So it's kind of a neat thing to watch revolve,
Yeah.
And
well, it's a journey.
I just been
I
going.
was gonna say, I tell people all the time that finding freedom and finding that life is not a destination.
Right.
And people think it's a destination, but it's not. It's a journey, and you got to really just slow down and enjoy the journey.
Absolutely.
B is canning like a mad woman. I mean, her processing kitchen is up and running full steam. And she spent the last, 4 or 5 days, all day, every single day in there trying to get it all put up, and she still has tons more to do. So,
and we got funding for the pantry. So I'm going to be able to remodel that garage and build the pantry like we wanted to here in the next 30 days, 45 days.
Yeah.
So
yeah, nice.
That'll be good. That'll be a big, huge step for us. Any last words?
I mean, hold the line, don't give an inch, and take accountability for everything that happens to you. It's all your fault, good and bad.
That's right. And if you don't do that, you can't go pursue a lifetime free.
Amen.
All right, everybody, take care. Go to Tag's live stream right after you watch this.
Yep.
Thanks, Milo.